And now, let us talk about the worship. You see, the nine Muses were worshipped collectively as guardians of all intellectual and artistic pursuits, but they were also distinguished by specific iconography, which would be symbols and attributes, that allowed ancient Greeks to identify them in art and literature. Now, each muse is traditionally associated with specific objects that represent her domain. Beginning with Calliope, her domain is epic poetry, and her traditional attributes are writing tablet, a stylus, or scroll, and sometimes a golden crown. And next, Cleo, or Cleo. Her domain is history, and her traditional attributes are scroll, book, or a set of tablets, often a trumpet or laurel wreath. And then, Euterpe. Her domain is lyric poetry, or music, and her traditional attributes are the aulos, which is a double flute, or panpipes. Next, Thalea. Her domain is comedy, and her traditional attributes are a comic mask, a shepherd's staff or pedum, or ivy wreath. Next, Melpomene, with her domain being tragedy, and her traditional attributes are a tragic mask, sword or club, and she often wears cothurnus, which are actors' boots. And then Terpsichore. Her domain is the choral dance, and her traditional attributes are the lyra and plectrum. And then we have Erato, and her domain is love poetry, and her traditional attributes are the chitarra, which is a larger lyra, or a wreath of roses. And then we have Polyhymnia, and her domains are sacred hymns, and her traditional attributes are a pensive and a meditative pose, often depicted veiled and leaning on a pillar. And then we have Urania. Her domain is the astronomy, and her traditional attributes are a celestial globe and a compass or staff. Now, festivals and games, beginning with the Musea in Thespiae, the most famous festival held every 4 years, a pentateuch cycle, in Valley of the Muses at the foot of Mount Helicon. Historically documented from the 3rd century BC through the Roman periods. It featured intense musical and poetic competitions, including contests for rhapsodes, heralds, and trumpeters. During the Roman era, it was often combined with the Erotidea, basically honoring Eros, and featured games honoring the Roman emperor. Then, of course, there are also school festivals. In many Greek cities, the Muses were patrons of education. Small festivals called Musea were celebrated in schools, where students and teachers offered sacrifices, not human sacrifices, to ensure academic success. And speaking of sacrifices, unlike most Olympian gods who received wine, The Muses were often given libations of water, milk, or honey, liquids believed to keep the mind sober and clear for inspiration. Next, we have the poet's encounter from Hesiod to the tradition of invocation. You see, for the Greeks, a poet did not create a poem, they received it. The most famous account of this is in Hesiod's initiation, Hesiod on Helicon. In the Theogony, Hesiod describes how he was shepherding his lambs on the slopes of Mount Helicon when the Muses appeared to him in a mist. They breathed a divine voice into him and gave him a laurel staff, symbolizing his authority to speak for the gods. Yet, crucially, they warned him. We know how to speak many false things as though they were true, but we know when we will to utter true things. Then the epic invocation. Following Hesiod and Homer, the invocation to the muse became a formal necessity. By asking the muse to sing in me, as in the Odyssey, the poet abdicated their own ego, ensuring the work was an objective divine truth. And Archilochos. Legend says that the poet Archilochos met the Muses as a boy. They took his cow and left him a lyra in its place, marking his life for poetry rather than labor. And for the last part, the Muses, the Afterlife, and the Orphic traditions. So, let us look at how the Muses transitioned from divine entities to personal guides for the living and guardians of the soul in the beyond. You see, in the later mystical traditions, particularly Orphism, based on the teachings of Orpheus, the son of Calliope, the Muses took on a profound eschatological role, guiding the soul after death. Beginning with the springs of memory, Orphic gold tablets found in graves provide instructions for the deceased. The soul is warned to avoid the spring of lethe, forgetfulness, and instead drink from the cold spring of mnemosyne, which means memory. And she is the titaness of the first generation as well as the mother of the 9 Muses. The trick here was to regain the divine memory of the soul's origin. And then we have the Musicos in the Isles of the Blessed, also known as Elysium or the Elysian Fields. In Orphic and Pythagorean thought, those who lived a life dedicated to the Muses, a musicos aner, were believed to achieve a higher state of existence. Their souls would ascend to the celestial spheres, where the Muses resided, as the harmony of the spheres. And lastly, guardians of the tomb. The Muses are often depicted on Roman period sarcophagi, obviously influenced by Greek Orphic ideas. They represent the hope that through the cult of the Muses, intellectual and artistic pursuits, one achieves a form of immortality that transcends physical death.